mech games kind of get a bad rap. I'm speaking about games that require players to piece together or upgrade a mech. That is, a large pilotable robot. Sizes vary. And they have all sorts of lukewarm reviews out there by the public. But just like the Warriors games, they have a very loyal fan base despite the often mediocre or downright bad reviews. So who's right? Why would these games have fans who love them despite the large majority of publicists hating them? It's not just games like Front Mission and Mech Assault and Armored Core. There's also games in varying series like Virtual On, Gundam, Custom Robo, Another Centuries Episode. They all get mediocre reviews. But check out the fan reviews. It's not like these games don't sell well. In Japan, they are among the highest selling games ever. One game in the genre that was recently released is Daemon X Machina, and it got beat up by almost every outlet. It's a damn shame too. So it's time to defend this game. And well, I'm not defending the entire mech genre as a whole, but the criticisms against Daemon X Machina can be said about a lot of these different games. And dissecting the harsh criticisms from journalists and gamers that simply never gave Daemon X Machina a chance it deserved, even before it was released. Let's go back to E3 2018, specifically Nintendo's Direct. That was the Direct that focused mostly on Smash Bros., and rightfully so, it's one of Nintendo's hugest games. I was excited for it like most people were, but one game that came out of the blue excited me just as much. Daemon X Machina, or DXM as I'll call it from now on. Mostly because it was so random to see, especially as an opener. The vibrant colors, the heavy metal reminiscent of Doom, and that abrupt ending. People's attentions quickly focused on the more light-hearted games that came after it, like Fortnite, Splatoon, and Mario Party. Even some publicists forgot to even mention it in their articles on the Direct. I don't know. That trailer had me hooked completely. But I didn't think it was a Nintendo exclusive at first, but it made sense to me. Look how unique it was in that trailer, and those cell shading and bright colors, very Nintendo-esque. I was excited to check on sites like Reddit to see what other people thought about that trailer. And, well, most of what I saw was positive. People were digging the art style, and the Armored Core vibes, a lot of Armored Core comments. It makes sense, since some of the same people involved in that series worked on DXM. So in a way, it was a bit like a spiritual successor. Right away, you had the Armored Core and robot fanbase on board. I think developers, Marvelous, planned that from the start. What they didn't plan on is the millions of other Switch owners who have never even touched a mech game before. It'll be a hard sell for sure. But the trailer was quick and powerful, so they hoped that would hook people in and want them asking more. The following days had Nintendo show off some gameplay from an early build. Some people enjoyed what they saw, a few naysayers here and there, more so due to the frame rate, and they were concerned how the Switch would handle a game like DXM. For the most part though, everything was looking good for Marvelous and Nintendo. And then another trailer was released, and the feedback was mixed. Some were excited, some wrote it off then and there. Now, I get that. I see a trailer for something that doesn't appeal to me, I probably won't show any interest in it. It's a brand new IP, being published by Nintendo. That doesn't happen very often. It's not like this was a well-established series that suffered from fatigue to warrant such a reaction. Here's a very talented group, and Marvelous, with some connections to Armored Core, exclusive to the Switch. A feedback demo was released. Keep the word feedback in mind. In February, earlier this year, allowing players to have a very early look at the game. Now that developers knew what they were doing, They were putting out an unpolished demo to get a reaction and feedback. But man, things were brutal. Feedback was warranted, of course, and I did agree with some of the complaints. I loved the demo though, personally. It reminded me of playing something like Virtual On. But I knew it was simply a beta of sorts, not yet completed. But others certainly didn't get the memo. Movement and attacks didn't feel heavy enough. Fair complaint. I understand that. You want your actions and explosions to have a punch. No gyro aiming. Nintendo has been using gyro aiming in some games recently. Not all of them, but I understand that in a shooting game like this, having that extra leverage would help in quick battles. Other minor complaints here and there, but then just came the straight up hate. It's trash, awful, looks bad. Looks bad? Something this unique and different looking looks bad? People seem to confuse graphics with art style. Let's not forget many people hated Wind Waker's graphics when it was first released. Same thing here. When the developers over at Marvelous heard the outcry, well, they addressed many of them in a feedback video on YouTube, pointing out any and all issues players had with the gameplay. Feedback provided much delight in the gaming community. When developers actually listen to gamers, it's kind of nice. But directly addressing them is even better, so DXM gained a lot more respect following that video. A follow-up demo was released, a Prologue demo, as it was called, a mere few weeks before the game was set to be released, following a Nintendo Direct in early September. Playing this demo would carry over to the release of the game, a brilliant move that is becoming more popular today. Now the game was finally polished and ready to be presented, as the company intended. Following that Prologue demo, the feedback was generally more positive. People were happy that the issues found in the first demo were addressed and changed, allowing for a much smoother gaming experience. Release day was finally here, but boy, it got lost in the shuffle of September releases. I'm not even including other consoles. The Switch just had Astral Chain released the previous week, Zelda was coming out the following week, and Dragon Quest the week after that. DXM was on the very bottom for anticipated releases. Plus, if gamers had multiple consoles, they also had the likes of Gears of War 5 and Borderlands 3 to play. If gamers weren't actively looking to play this game, it just wasn't going to sell well at that point in time. And, well, sales were okay. The lack of proper advertisement is to blame, but also Marvelous copyright striking videos on YouTube didn't help either. Very strange for them to do that, but Nintendo is pretty notorious for copyright strikes, so who's to say? Reviews were in, and they were pretty brutal. One thing was obvious though, most of these reviewers were not properly playing the game. That's not an opinion of mine, it's just straight up facts. Many popular articles and videos were full of misinformation or pure ignorance about the game. Let's take a look at some sources here. First up is IGN. This is the go-to place for video game reviews. One reviewer may have a completely different opinion about a game than someone else. Remember God Hand on PS2? It was a fun and silly game, yet the original review scored it a 3 out of 10. Yet it was on their list of top 100 PS2 games. Makes sense, right? And I won't ever forget them doing a 25 greatest Dreamcast games list and not including Shenmue at all. And even insulting fans with a follow-up article titled, "Where the F is Shenmue?" Now, the link doesn't work anymore, but I remember it vividly stating that Shenmue is a horrible game. Yeah, totally not a groundbreaking game or anything like that, right, IGN? Oh, and I've seen the review for Shenmue 3. Don't worry, I'll get to that another day. Anyway, so as the number one guys around in the gaming review business, it's pretty evident that people will listen to their opinion, more so than others, unfortunately. A 6.5 out of 10. This is lower than most other reviews too. so let's see why they would grade this barely passing. It looks fantastic, and then there's praise for customization and weapon variety and the boss battles. Positives there, let's see the negatives. First off, I'm assuming points were taken off for the story of the game, since that's the bulk of the complaints. Which is weird. I mean, this is Nintendo we're talking about. Mario Odyssey didn't have points taken away for its bare story, or any Nintendo game other than perhaps Fire Emblem and Zelda really. Story is never the biggest highlight. Why can we as gamers enjoy Mario Maker, or Splatoon for its gameplay, but something like Daemon X Machina, with its lackluster story, we have to be so critical of it? The reviewer says the developers wanted the gamers to care for the story. I don't know how much of that is completely true. I think it's pretty tongue-in-cheek sometimes with the over-the-top characters and their names. It's pretty obvious that the focus of the game isn't the story at all. And listen, it's subjective whether or not you'll enjoy the story. One thing is clear though, don't knock a game for its story when you don't do that for other games. One thing I'd like to note is that the game does have a good amount of voice acting.
I get where you're coming from, Zoa, but maybe we shouldn't overthink this too much.
Whereas a game like Astral Chain is mostly text-based with some voice acting here and there. So if we weren't basing a review on the story and focusing on gameplay, well, that's where IGN attacked the game the most. Comparing it to the golden era of mech games like Armored Core, yet saying it feels like it hasn't injected enough life into that old genre. At this point, the reviewer gushes over how a change in the loadout is quickly obvious upon playing, or how great the character upgrading is, but then to call it barely an improvement over older games? And then to conclude all this by saying none of this really matters. What? In 2 hours, they felt they had experienced all that is to offer in the game. That's a ridiculous statement. You can't possibly have obtained all the different parts and weapons and customized them to their full potential in 2 hours. In 2 hours, you're barely scratching the surface of even understanding how the game works. Plus, the character upgrades? 5 hours into the game, I thought I wouldn't find a layout I enjoyed more than the one I first set, but I was wrong when I unlocked a new weapon and combined it with a sniper rifle, for example. You can't say you have a grasp of a game in 2 hours of playing it, I'm sorry. The fact that they say there is only 2 varieties in the mission is a bit unfair as well. While most missions do require you to destroy X target, there are plenty of unique missions as well. Different layouts for the stages as well too, whether it's chasing a train, protecting buildings from meteors, rescuing, there are slight varieties there. The reviewer even stated they haven't tried online. Well, that's an aspect of the game that probably shouldn't have been skipped for a review. When it was initially released, it didn't have PvP, so I won't comment on that. With the recent update, it does. But from the start, you were able to play missions with 3 other players. I'm finding it hard to justify a 6.5 out of 10 with what was written. Let's be honest, they probably found the game to be boring, even calling it a job to play through. That's fair enough. Some genre of games aren't for everyone. Maybe it's much less of this game being just okay, and more so not your speed. Now, I have no problem with that score, but now he says, Link's Awakening retains that style and feel of its 1993 self, but looks and controls like a game, albeit a retro-styled one, made in 2019. Praising a game with an older feel to it, yet saying it's fresh in the modern era. Why can't the same be said about DXM? Truth be told, the gameplay of Zelda never gets old. But that's the thing, it's made to appeal to a wider audience. Now, you could say that a game should be meant to be picked up and played by anyone. No, that's not true. Let's not pretend like that's true either. A casual gamer picking up Demon's Soul or Bloodborne is not going to enjoy the game as much as others. Are those bad games? No. DXM is a game that isn't made for casual audiences. Nintendo knows this, they even gave a disclaimer of sorts in their Nintendo Direct. It's a niche game in a niche genre on a system that doesn't have any mech games, and Nintendo, though they did have Custom Robo, barely has any mech games on any of their systems. It's a new experience for a lot of people. This game isn't demanding you enjoy it, but it's made for those who do enjoy those type of games. I will say that the IGN review did praise the art design of this game, and I would argue that's the best aspect of the game. Nothing else looks like this. Whether you like the anime aesthetics or not isn't the point, just visually it's beautiful and unlike anything else. But when reading comments like this, I don't get it. It isn't 4K HDR highly realistic, but to say it looks bad just doesn't make sense. Switch isn't the most powerful console, we all know that, but pulling off such a stylish look that is unique like this is great. Some don't like the art style, but to say it looks bad, that doesn't make sense. Another review I want to look at is the lowest one available on Metacritic. Justin Clark from Slant Magazine gave DXM 2 out of 5 stars. The next inkling you get that something is off about this game is the sheer fact that you're thrown into a far future world where cartoonishly gruff mercenaries spout terms and references to in-universe events and conflicts before you have even the slightest clue of who you are and what exactly has happened to the world. I like to compare this game to Astral Chain. In many ways, they're similar. Each story has players thrown right into the middle of an already established science fiction-like world. Astral Chain is much more cyberpunk than DXM, but that isn't to say there aren't a few aspects of cyberpunk in DXM. And like pretty much every cyberpunk story out there, it plays out in an already established world where characters in the game use terms that aren't explained. Read Appleseed or Ghost in the Shell. Plenty of invented terms are there. Let's not act like this is a fair criticism. A Clockwork Orange is hailed as a masterpiece, yet most of the vocabulary in that novel is made up. The reader can learn along the way, though. Nothing would have been as effective as muting the narrative problems than the core gameplay being stellar, and sadly, it isn't. There just isn't enough substantial proof here for me to believe that this reviewer is this critical of the game. He makes comparisons to Anthem, but never really elaborates. He contradicts himself by saying it's hard to target enemies because a target system doesn't act like a target system, but it does. It locks on, making rifle shots very easy. Shoulder weapons function differently, but you have to read the fine text there. Some are heat-seeking, others are motion detected, so there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of accuracy with power. That's how balancing works. He mentions how certain weapons and gear are ineffective against some of the enemies. Some of the enemies are very fast and move around a lot, making some of the weapons, such as the shoulder missiles and rifles, ineffective at times because they can't lock on. But other weapons like flamethrowers or melee attacks are effective. It's about finding a good layout for certain missions. Why else would the game offer this huge loadout section? So the main criticisms boil down to story and the fact that it isn't user-friendly. This warrants a 4 out of 10. I don't think I'm alone in saying that Daemon X Machina is perhaps the most user-friendly mech game in recent memory. The controls are very fluid, and the fact you can completely change the layout makes things even easier. The game has a dedicated button for boosting. You can even upgrade your speed in the game, and attach down thrusters for even more boosting. Fast, twitchy playing, especially with the help of gyro aiming, is the way to play DXM. There's no other way to put it. Sure, many of the low-ranking missions are more so tutorials, but it's pretty evident that the game eventually calls for the player to play faster, especially in the free missions that have a time limit. The fact that you can completely map the controller to any way you want makes the game completely accessible in terms of gameplay. So what we have with the vast majority of reviewers is they didn't enjoy the gameplay, saying it's dated and that the story is bad. In fact, they hold the story to such high regards that it brings the score down so low. Or frankly, they just don't know how to play the game and don't bother even learning. It's frustrating that DXM, a great game I think, is seen so poorly by the vast majority. The demo is to blame, but if people realized that it was a feedback demo, I think things would have ended up differently. But all I see everywhere I look for this game are comments like this. Why is there such harsh criticism for a passionate team with so many talents involved to create a new experience from such a misunderstood genre? Yes, it isn't something you play every day, but different doesn't mean bad. Different doesn't mean confusing. There is an audience for this game, and yes, they will buy it and play it, but others don't have to be put off right away. It's the type of game that you can pick up and play quick rounds of. Complete a mission here, and you could set it down. It's not a game that requires a few straight hours of gaming. I don't think it's that type of game, and a lot of games on the Switch benefit from playing in short bursts. Daemon X Machina is one of those. One thing I will say is that the $60 price tag is high, but at this point you can't really use that against the game. Every Nintendo exclusive gets this price tag, even re-releases of Wii U games. But it's a fun, unique, and different game for Nintendo. I had to defend it, and you should too if you enjoy it. Why let the vocal majority say what is and isn't good? Stand up for what you believe in, right? And I'll be back to defend another game soon enough. IGN. Oh boy, so look forward to that, and well, thanks for watching.